And you're on.
All right. Hi, guys.
Okay, let's see. That's what I was doing.
We're sitting right next to each other, so there's some different. Will you mute it on Zoom?
I'm trying to do.
There we go. I'm still getting.
Get the audio set. I'll try that. Did that work?
Are we good? Okay, I think we're okay. All right. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so as you can see, this presentation is called Right in the Fields. And I thought about that. I'm a very like punny guy. I love puns. Sometimes I wonder if I have a child running out there somewhere that I don't know, because I love dad jokes, but I'm not a dad as far as I'm aware. But I wanted to talk about right in the fields, because we're going to talk about a couple of things. One of them, I mean, of course, we're going to talk about feelings. We're talking about anxiety and depression and feelings that can lead up to them. And then also just the word right in the fields, and how people with anxiety and depression don't feel like they're in the right space, or like the feelings that they have are the right feelings. Excuse me. And I really enjoy this quote by Khalil Gibran. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I share it with my clients often, but it says, our anxiety does not come from planning for the future, but from wanting to control it. Because, I mean, you can plan for the future all you want, but their belief, their underlying belief, is that they need to have control over the future to stop things from happening, bad things that happened in the past, or things that they don't feel like are supposed to happen. And we'll get more into that as the presentation goes on. Maybe, there we go. All right, so a little bit about me. I am originally from Bountiful, Utah. Went to Bountiful High, did all that. I'm the second youngest of 9 kids, which is pretty common for Utah, I think, or at least not surprising for families from Utah. So my parents wanted 12, but they got 9. So that's still a lot. I'm not gonna have 9 kids, I can tell you that much. I received my bachelor's in social work from Utah Valley University. I graduated in 2018 with that. And then I graduated a year later, did the advanced standing program, master's in social work program from the University of Utah. And then, I don't know why, I mean, I do know why, but some people don't know why, but I continued school, took the summer off, and then went back to school that next August and got a second master's degree in legal studies from the University of Utah. So if you can see my background behind me, it's actually inside the law school at the University of Utah. And I graduated with that degree last August, I believe. And recently, last week, I got engaged to the stunningly beautiful Sarah DeZubak, who is this lovely lady on your screen in the right picture. I am also, I don't know if I'll show you, but she got me socks for Valentine's Day, and they have her face on it. And so I'm wearing those socks right now. And they're pink, and they go well with my blue suit. So she was just like, you gotta wear them. So if you want to see them, maybe I'll show them at the end. All right, so the game plan for today. In this presentation, these are the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what anxiety and depression are and are not. We're going to talk about the complexity of anxiety and depression, the should mindset, perspective, shifting perspective, how perspective goes a long way when it comes to anxiety and depression, and how it fuels that. False identities, we'll talk a lot about that. And then lastly, we'll end just with the not knowing approach, how to approach clients with anxiety and depression in a not knowing way. And that might sound familiar to some of you, but I'm hoping my main goal throughout this presentation is to help you learn something that you didn't know before. So hopefully I can do that. I am not an expert on this in any way, shape, or form. I'm still learning about anxiety and depression. But these are, throughout this presentation, I'm just sharing things that I have learned personally from working with clients, things that I've noticed and written down and used that I feel like have been beneficial in my practice. Okay, so what anxiety and depression are not? Anxiety and depression are not rational. The thoughts that you have, they're not really rational thoughts. Like using logic against somebody that has anxiety and depression just like doesn't work. Because you can tell them the truth and they're just like, yeah, I know that, but like it doesn't change anything, right? Anxiety and depression are not an excuse. They're very real things that are happening inside people's bodies and inside people's minds, and when they don't understand them, like it affects them physically and mentally and environmentally, situationally, all that jazz. So not an excuse. Anxiety and depression are not the same thing to like each other. Anxiety is not depression. Depression is not anxiety. I wouldn't say they're very different, because they both have to do with keeping in feelings and emotions and not feeling them. But I don't know, I talk a lot with clients about their emotional tank, and how all of us just at the bottom of our tank, we have just like the normal amount of anxiety. Like you're going to take a test, that's anxiety inducing. You're going to ask somebody out on a date, that's anxiety inducing. You're going to give a presentation in front of who knows how many people over Zoom, that's anxiety inducing. I've been feeling anxiety since last night. So it's like, it's normal stuff. But then every now and then you'll have something that adds to the tank. You suffer a loss. Someone dies that's close to you. You get rejected, on and on and on and on. Those feelings that you weren't given permission by parents or I was going to say leaders. So like leaders, teachers, that kind of thing, friends. And you feel like you're not supposed to feel those things. Like you push them down and they add to your tank. And anxiety and depression like are towards the top of the tank when they start to affect you a little more physically and then they get a little more powerful. I believe that anxiety is lower down on the tank than depression is. Depression's a little closer to the top of the tank and anxiety is down here. I believe that because when you feel anxiety, when anxiety happens and you feel anxious and it starts to affect you physically, sometimes people get like stomach aches or headaches or like they're just emotionally exhausted at the end of the day because they're just trying to keep it together. Like it affects you physically, but you can still function throughout the day. When it comes to depression though, depression just, your mind is just like, okay, we're powering down. Like they just want to stay in bed, don't want to do anything. And I like to use the analogy or like compare it to a computer that, I don't know if you've ever used a computer that's just hot on the bottom, even though the fan is just like going as hard as it can, but the computer just won't calm, like, what's the term? I almost said calm down, but it won't cool down. That's what it is. Like it won't cool down, even though the fan is going a million miles per hour. That's what I imagine when I think of depression, is that like your brain and your body, like it's doing everything to help you calm down, but just like nothing is working. And so your brain's just like, all right, we're going to shut down, just like a computer shuts down, and it's just not going to work for a little bit. So anxiety and depression, similar, but not exactly. I also believe that anxiety and depression are not experienced the same way by everybody. Yes, we go into sessions and we talk to people, and there are certain commonalities that stick out, that help us when we're in therapy and help us get to know our clients a little bit faster. But like jumping to conclusions can stop us a little bit and make us not as effective with our clients. So understanding that anxiety and depression are experienced differently by everybody, we can have those little things, those little commonalities, like the symptoms of anxiety and depression and that kind of a thing. But how they're experienced and how they've influenced that person, like that person's past and how they're now influencing their future, or what they perceive to be their future, it's very different for everybody. Everybody has different experiences. And lastly, anxiety and depression are not the fault of the person who is feeling them. I talk a lot with clients about this. The main thing I want them to get out of the first session when they meet with me is to know that it's not their fault that they're feeling these things. The way they grew up, the way they were raised, the permission that they didn't get to feel those feelings, they didn't choose to feel those. But it is their responsibility to figure that out, right? So I tend to let them know that it's not their fault. That's the main thing I want them to know in the first session, is that it's not their fault. And the way that I help them know that is I basically just talk to them about the thoughts in their head and the thoughts that pop in. And I'm like, the fact that they're causing you stress, those thoughts that pop in, like that's kind of a telltale sign that they're not coming from you. I don't. I think we have a question. Okay, what's the comment?
No, they're not the same. I've seen many similarities. I've seen people shut down mentally with anxiety. Depression could be both physically and mentally, but anxiety is just as detrimental as depression.
Yeah, right. So Brian, your comment's totally spot on. Like anxiety can be just as detrimental as depression. That is totally for sure. Because like depression, and from what I've seen, like the body more shuts down, but like anxiety, if it's bad enough, like it's as if the person's shutting down because they're afraid to do anything, because they don't know what's going to happen, and the anxiety being so much and so great can halt them from just living their lives and doing things that they want to do. So yeah, totally. So along with the thoughts when it comes to the person, to help them know that it's not their fault, is that they, sorry, lost my train of thought for a second. So the negative thoughts pop into their head, causes them distress. And I like to point out that it causes them distress so they know that it's not them. Also, I like to point out that I'm just like, those thoughts in your head aren't you. You is the conscious thought that pops up that says, why the crap am I feeling this way? Like, I don't want to think these thoughts. I don't want these thoughts in my head. So pointing that out and pointing out that their brain is a little different from them, like those thoughts aren't them. Just because they're happening in their head doesn't mean that it's them, but they think it's them because it's happening in their head. The other way that I do it, it says red button on this bullet point, and that's I use this analogy of, I tend to say, imagine there was a red button on the arm of the chair that you're sitting on, or couch, or whatever it is, that there's a red button next to you. I was like, if you could, if you knew that pushing that red button would stop all of this and would make you feel 100% and help you understand everything, would you push the button? And 9 out of 10 times, the person will be like, yeah. And it's just like, yeah, you'd probably break the button from hitting it so hard. Because you're just like, all right, I'm done. And so I like to point out, it's just like, if you had control, or like if you knew what to do in order to help these feelings go away, like you'd be doing it. Right. So, like, it's not their fault that that's happening, because they don't know what to do. That's why they come to us to figure that out. All right, what anxiety and depression are. Starts out a little not scientific, and then we'll get more scientific at the end. But anxiety and depression are waking up tired even though your day just started. Like you wake up, didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Your thoughts were racing as you were trying to go to bed. There's so many what ifs out there in the future. You don't even know if you're going to wake up the next morning. And so some people are afraid to go to sleep because they don't know what's going to happen. So just waking up tired and already emotionally exhausted because you're thinking about what the day could hold, like what might happen. Answering texts embarrassingly fast or sometimes not at all, depending on anxiety and depression, what the levels are. You might have anxiety over, or your clients might have anxiety over if they don't text fast enough, then that means that they don't care about that person. Or if they text too fast, then they're too eager, or the person's going to think they're needy or clingy or whatever it is. So just having those contradicting thoughts in there, definitely anxiety and depression, like thinking about the past and what happened in the past and how you texted that person before, and like it didn't work out the way that you wanted to, and so now you're like second guessing your actions going towards like texting new people. That could totally influences how you do things. Self-doubt and a lack of confidence in you, yourself, and those around you. Self-worth has so much to do with anxiety and depression. If they don't think that they're good enough, if like they think like even if I put in the effort, nothing's really going to happen. If they are looking for external validation in order to validate something inside of them and give them permission to feel their feelings, like that has to do with self-worth. Like they're not giving themselves that permission because they don't feel like they deserve that unless they earn it. Wanting to fix something that isn't even a problem. A lot of the time our brain will just bubble up thoughts and there's a problem or something that we feel like is a problem. And it's something that our brain concocted. Like it'll come up and it'll just be like, these people think that I'm this way. And then all of a sudden another thought will pop up and it'll just be like, well, I'll show them. And it's like, nothing was wrong. Like you kind of created that, like your brain created that on your own. And so just wanting to fix something that isn't even a problem is a big one that I've seen. Wanting to change the past and simultaneously control how the past influences the future. Kind of talked about that a little bit with texting. But depression comes from the past, wishing to change the past. Anxiety comes from wanting to control the future. But they definitely play off of each other. Something, like I said, something happened in the past, caused you to feel depressed because you wish you could go back and change that. Excuse me, but you realize that you probably can't. And so what you do is all of your behavior, all of your anxiety is around not repeating that, or at least most of your anxiety is that. Not repeating what happened in the past. So I'm going to do this in the future so that I don't repeat the past, if that makes sense. And then lastly, this is more scientific, but anxiety and depression are symptoms of underlying beliefs, narratives, and unfelt emotions. We'll get more in depth as the presentation goes on, but that's basically just that. Anxiety and depression, we see them as like mainly just diagnoses. That it's just like one thing. It's like you have anxiety or you have depression, but it's just like anxiety here, and then like put a line under it, and then it's just like it's caused by this and this and this and this and this experience and this feeling and this experience. Like there's a whole list underneath anxiety and depression of events and emotions and things that have happened to these people that they like simply haven't come to terms with yet. They haven't given themselves permission to feel those things. And they haven't, I guess, gained the perspective, learned the lesson that came along with, if they made a mistake, learning that lesson, whatever it may be, there are things underneath that are causing that anxiety. But instead of looking at what's underneath anxiety, they're looking at the anxiety itself. I really like this. I noticed, I can't remember who it was, but I noticed somebody had the background of a Quidditch field. And I was like, oh, he's gonna like this slide. But I was putting up this presentation, and this is the scene that entered my mind. I don't know how many of you know or like Harry Potter, but spoiler alert, at the end of Harry Potter in book 7, Harry and Dumbledore are in basically like the spirit world where they're both like, Dumbledore's dead, spoiler alert, but Harry is somewhat dead. It's interesting. Anyway, Harry basically wonders like what's happening because he finds out that he's like still alive. He could go back if he wants to. And so he says, Professor, is this all real or is it just happening inside my head? And Dumbledore responds by saying, of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean it's not real? And I really enjoy that, especially when it comes to talking about anxiety and depression. Like, yes, for the most part, it's just in our head. But it wasn't put there by us. It was put there by other people. It was put there by situations or environments, whatever it may be. Sometimes it is genetic. Sometimes we can't really control it all that much. And so, but that still has to do with our head. We take medications in order to balance the chemicals in our brain. But even though it's just happening inside their heads, inside our clients' heads, like it is real to them. Like they're actually feeling these things, like it's affecting them physically. They're not able to live their lives the way that they want to. It is real to them. And so approaching it in a way of like, you already have that preconceived notion of it's not really real. Like, let's help them see that it's not real. I believe it's so much more powerful to, even though you know it's probably not real, like step into their shoes for a minute. Take time to get to know how they see things so that you can help them know how to change that perspective. Because if you're seeing it from the outside, it's hard to change that perspective if you're not seeing it the way that they're seeing it. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions so far? Take a minute.
Is your mic on or your speakers are on?
My speakers are on now. Sorry, I'm going to turn my speakers on just in case people are talking. If you try to ask a question, you can go ahead and try again. Okay, all right. Onward. I just thought about this. Should I stay or should I? No. So if we go back to here, symptoms of underlying beliefs, narratives, and unfelt emotions. A lot of the time, these underlying beliefs and narratives come from what I call the should mentality. And I'm sure a lot of us know what that is. Talk to our clients about not shoulding on ourselves and just giving ourselves shoulds that are unneeded. As I've worked with clients, I've come to learn these things. And if you have any thoughts, feel free to like write them down for yourself, or you can share them with us about your thoughts toward shoulds. So these are more of my beliefs, what I've noticed from working with clients, but the should mentality in my mind is based in fear. When parents raise their kids through shoulds, they're saying you should know better, you should be doing this, you're supposed to do this, that kind of thing, without telling them why. I believe it's based more in not that they're like consciously trying to control their kids, but they're afraid of what might happen. And so they say you should do it this way so that this bad thing doesn't happen, right? They're kind of projecting that onto their kids. So I believe that shoulds are based in fear, and also we'll get into it, but with people that are doing shoulds with themselves and shoulds with the future or with life as it is right now, the shoulds can come from the past. And there's a fear of repeating the past. That's saying like, this happened in the past, I didn't like the way it worked out, so I should do it this way in the future. time and time again, that comes up. Oh, I guess I could have just kept going. So shoulds, I believe, come from one or both of two places. Either they come from the past, like I just described, or they come from others. Most of the time, I believe that they come from other people. And even like in the past, something happened, somebody made fun of the client for it, or they got punished, or whatever it is, like that, those consequences came from other people. And so in a way, those shoulds came from other people and their past and are influencing their future and how they are living their life. Excuse me. When it comes to just others, examples could be mom told me to clean my room. I should clean my room so that I don't get in trouble. The teacher gave me an assignment. I need to do my homework so I don't get a bad grade. Everything that comes with should, oh, look at that. Parents, teachers, culture, society, all that stuff. Shoulds, I believe that people use shoulds when they're, when they're living their life. I just had lunch and so it's trying to come back up. But I just, they're using shoulds in order to avoid pain. They're avoiding punishment by their parents. They're avoiding punishment by their teachers. They're avoiding punishment in a relationship. Like I should, like this last relationship I had went this way. I didn't like it, so I should act this way. Or even if you're in a toxic relationship and you learned how you learned about love from that toxic relationship, all of a sudden you have that belief of love looks like this. It's supposed to be this way. And so helping clients see what a healthy relationship is like goes against that should, because it's like, no, that's not how it should be, right? That's not how it's supposed to work. Yeah.
Clients reporting suicide ideation and tourism lately. You see any common activating events? Has COVID been a factor?
With suicidal ideation. COVID has definitely been a factor, I think. We'll talk more about identities in a little bit down the road, but I feel like COVID has been a factor when it comes to my clients. Just one being cooped up all the time. And like COVID, in a way, excuse me, has been a little bit of a should. As the government and the CDC have been trying to figure things out, like it's kind of like, okay, until we figure this out, we should go into lockdown or whatever it is, right? And so having those shoulds come on us and then coming on our kids and on our clients, they, like the parents don't really know what's happening because the government doesn't really know what's happening, or didn't. And then the kids don't know because the parents don't know. And so like the kids are looking for answers, trying to figure out why. Kids are very like black and white. They're very literal. And so if you can't tell them why, like they kind of struggle with doing it when they don't know the why. So when it comes to suicidal ideation, I believe that it is with that because they're feeling emotions, they're feeling scared or whatever it is. And sometimes with parents, they're uncomfortable with that, with their kids feeling those things because the parents don't have the answers and the parents don't want to not have the answers, right? So it could affect the parents, it could affect the kids in that way. And the suicide ideation is just a part of that. They want to not have the answers anymore. Excuse me. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. Activating events for the suicide ideation. We'll get into that a little bit because later on we'll talk about false identities and talk about how trying to live up to that false identity of like who they wish they were and who they're supposed to be, but all they see are flaws, or all they see are weaknesses, or or that kind of a thing, and they're not accepting who they really are. They're trying to be somebody else like that. I feel like that influences suicide ideation a lot because they feel like they're not good enough. They're not measuring up to who they think they should be, or who society or their parents or whoever it is wanting them to be a certain way and not accepting them as they are. And so the kids are just like, I can't live up to that, and so I just might as well not live, which is, I feel like, a big thing. Okay, here's an example. I met with a client the other night, last week, who said that he didn't know why he got so angry at his wife sometimes. He'd be having a discussion, he'd get a little angry, like a little defensive when like she started talking about things. It was seemingly out of nowhere. He also noted that he wanted other people to act the same way that he acted, and if they didn't, he would get extremely frustrated with them to the point that even if the event happened in the morning, he would still lose sleep over it that night. So this is the example that he gave. So he was going to get on the freeway. He had the right of way. The guy coming up to him had a yield. The guy didn't yield. And so my client had to slam on his brakes, get out of the way, that kind of a thing. And instead of like, yes, that's something to be frustrated about. It's just like, that was rude. Like, why did you do that? But instead of just being like, I don't know what that guy's going through. Like, I'm glad he didn't hit me, like that kind of a thing. We're all okay. Like being frustrated about it for half an hour to an hour and then letting it go. That happened in the morning. He thought about it all day. It affected his work. And then at night, like his wife's in bed asleep, but like he couldn't sleep because of what happened. So after talking with him for some time, we realized that the reason why he lost sleep over such trivial things was due to a lack of control over what might happen to him and those he cared about. I found this really interesting when I was talking to him about this. He told me he was adopted when he was a baby, and so was his sister. They're both adopted, just they're not blood relatives. And that his parents weren't the most caring. Like his dad was fine towards him and acted fine, but his mom was very aggressive, wanted things done a certain way. And if you didn't do it her way and exactly her way, she'd basically abuse him. And so he was raised with the narrative that if he didn't do things the way his mom wanted them done, aka the right way is mom's way, that not only would he be punished, but his sister would be punished as well. So this guy comes through the yield. All of a sudden, those feelings come back up because he's obeying the law while he's driving, which is mom's way of just like, this is how you do things, that kind of a thing. And then this guy doesn't obey the law. And so all of a sudden, this fear comes up that not only will he be in trouble, but his sister will be in trouble. Because when he was a kid, he would always try and do things the right way or do things mom's way. Because if he didn't, not only would he get in trouble, but his sister would be beaten as well. So his actions caused her pain, if that makes sense. So a lot of thinking in that. This narrative has followed him into adulthood. Although he doesn't live with his mom, he is still under the subconscious belief that if he doesn't do things his mom's way, and then he and those he cares about will be hurt. So like he's trying to do everything the right way, because if not, then like his wife is going to be hurt, his sister's going to be hurt, like everybody around him that he loves is going to be hurt unless he does things a certain way that's mom's way. Even though he's not living with her anymore, that's still in there. But what's really interesting and exciting is that together he and I have the opportunity to rewrite that narrative, let go of what mom wanted him to do, let go of how mom told him to do things, and like notice those beliefs for himself, learn those beliefs, being able to see like, okay, I feel like this is right, I feel like this is wrong, and be able to create his own belief system based on how he feels rather than how he thinks his mom would feel about that. Hopefully that all makes sense. Any questions or comments? you have questions, feel free to type them out and Michael will stop me. Okay, so in summation, this is what his mom taught him. Also, I just like Tangled. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but this is Mother Gothel, and she sings the song Mother Knows Best. And so I put Mother Knows Worst because in this case, the mom didn't really know what she was doing. But so this is what the client's mother taught him by teaching him to do things a certain way and not helping him figure out who he is and then what he believes and all of that. She taught him to fear her, to fear himself. So not really trust himself with decisions, things like that, like always having to check even in his mind of just like, what would mom do? Or just like, what would mom want me to do, even subconsciously. To simultaneously worry over things out of his control, but also to believe that he should have control over things out of his control. So just all of the feelings of control and just like feeling a lack of control if he's not able to control every little thing. Not so much OCD, but just like what's going to happen, the outcome of any situation if he's not able to control that. He feels like he should, because if he didn't do things a certain way, if he didn't control that outcome, if he didn't do things the right way, the outcome would be that he would be beaten and his sister would be beaten. And so he grew up learning that he's like, okay, I need to control the outcome. I have the power to do that because I had the power to control what I was doing here and control what the outcome was, which was either mom beat us or she didn't beat us. And so I was like, I'm going to control everything here to make sure that mom doesn't beat us. So in order to avoid that pain, now that's followed in here to adulthood, where it's like, in order to avoid pain, all I have to do is do things of my own accord in order to control the outcome so that nothing bad happens. But the outside world is different than what he learned growing up. And then another thing is just to fear failure, to fear making mistakes, because if you made a mistake, there was a punishment. There was always a punishment. So now as an adult, he has this underlying belief that his best will never be good enough because as a kid, his best never was good enough. Going back to self-worth and just like, whatever I do, it's not going to make a difference because it didn't make a difference back then, unless I was doing things the way mom wanted them done. But if I did things the way I wanted them done, or the things that I felt were right, like I couldn't do that because in the end I was still wrong. I wasn't right. Which leads to false identities. So on one side, these dots in the middle, I tried to make like a wall. But anyway, on one side, we have who we are. And on the other side, we have who we wish we were. Who we are is that just our beliefs and who we are and what we think and our flaws and all of that. And then who we wish we were is the person that we want to be seen. Does someone have a?
How do you help LGBTQ clients with not needing their own shoulds or society shoulds or family shoulds?
So that's a really good question. The question was how on the chat, which was how do you help LGBTQ kids with that? That is a complex question because it comes down to like they grew up with this belief and all of a sudden they're having feelings on the inside that contradict the beliefs, or like maybe the expectations of the parents, or like my parents are heterosexual man and woman and they're married, and so it's like I feel this way. I'm attracted to the same gender, the same sex, and so it's like they're different, and that can be hard to talk about. And so the should or the supposed to can come from their parents of just like, I'm supposed to feel this way. I'm supposed to be heterosexual. I'm supposed to be attracted to the opposite gender, the opposite sex. But I'm not. And that kind of feeds into, like, I'm grateful for that question because it kind of feeds into false identities a little bit, and we can use that as an example. But like, so who we wish we were, those who feel anxiety and depression believe that they need to be someone different than who they are, whether that comes from parents or from friends or whatever it is. Like, if I'm not this person, I'm going to be rejected, right? So who we wish we were is someone who has no flaws. Like, I'm perfect. Like, a lot of people talk about perfection. It's like, I'm perfect, I have no flaws. Does nothing wrong. This is different than doing everything right. Does nothing wrong is different because doing everything right, I think, still implies in their mind that they have the capacity to do something wrong. But it's like, even though I have that capacity, like, I'm doing everything right. Also, doing nothing wrong, they don't want to do anything wrong because that means then they're like friends with everybody and like everybody likes them, and whatever they do, what they do is not the wrong thing because it ends up being positive, right? Instead of negative, they're avoiding that pain. There we go. Gets everyone to like them. That's who we wish we were, as someone that everybody liked, which isn't realistic as much as we'd like it to be. And has everything going their way. Life is going back to shoulds and supposed to. Life should be this way. Life is supposed to be this way. They're putting up this filter of who they wish they were, saying like life is good, or like you'll meet people where it's just like life's fine. Like, yeah, my dad just died, but like it's fine. It's cool. You know, like something stressful goes on and they just kind of just push it down and just bury it. And that's different than who we are. So I believe one key to clients working through anxiety and depression is to help them accept themselves as who and what they are. So going back to LGBTQ, like, do they really accept themselves as part of the LGBTQ community? Have they kind of researched on the inside instead of the outside, not asking people like what they think about the LGBTQ community, but like, what do they think about that? Have they researched this attraction that they have to the same sex? Have they come to accept that and just allow it to be there, and I guess not tried to control that and not had a judgment against that feeling, if that makes sense. So who we are is someone who makes mistakes. Can't get past that. Like, we're just going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But what we can control is how we react to those mistakes if we focus on the lesson rather than on the mistake. Doesn't have all the answers. I definitely don't have all the answers. I'm surprised I've made it this far in this presentation with you guys asking questions. Hopefully I've been able to give some sort of answer, but I do not have all the answers, and that's okay. Like, we're not supposed to have all the answers. I like, sometimes with clients, I talk about like if a 5-year-old walked in to the room and there was like a physics question up on the board, like, would you expect that 5-year-old to be able to solve that physics question on the board? And it's like, no, they're 5, like they haven't really learned that yet. That's like not until like the end of high school, if they get that far. I mean, like in math, I didn't get that far in math. So like there's a physics question and it's just like, okay, why? Like, why wouldn't you? And it's just like, well, they're not there yet. It's like, okay. And I was like, so why are you expecting so much out of yourself when you're not there yet? So like, not having all the answers isn't a bad thing. And realizing that they don't have all the answers, and instead of viewing that as a burden, viewing that more as a blessing, and kind of just being like, oh, if I don't have the answer to that, that means I don't really have to like research it right now in order for my job or whatever it is. Like, it's more of a blessing because it's like, that's not my problem. I don't have to worry about that. I can let someone else handle that while I handle myself and figure things out. Who we are, someone that asks for help. It's hard to ask for help. It's hard to be humble and to kind of swallow that pride a little bit, and to just be like kind of going with, I don't have all the answers. It's hard to, I guess, let that go and ask for help and admit to yourself and accept that it's just like, I don't always know what I'm doing, and that's okay. And most importantly, who we are is someone who has emotions. I've met a lot of teens here and other people that don't like the fact that they have emotions because they don't understand them. Sometimes I'll write on the board with my clients, like the phrase that they said, where it's like, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel depressed. I don't want to feel sad, whatever it is. And I'll write that on the board and put the punctuation at the end. And I'm just like, okay, this is good, but I feel like it's not as succinct as it could be. And I'll change the decimal point to go after the word feel. So it's not, I don't want to feel depressed. It's, I don't want to feel. And I think a lot of the time people don't want to feel. That could go towards suicidal ideation. There was that question about that. That could go toward LGBTQ questions, that kind of thing, because they're feeling something that they don't quite understand. And so instead of like, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to feel confused, I don't want to feel whatever it is, it's I don't want to feel, which then can lead to like, I can't control my feelings and I just want them to stop. So I'm going to make them stop by committing suicide. Hopefully that makes sense. Does somebody have
For clients who struggle with identity crisis, especially youth, what sort of things would you do to educate or assist the family before or as they're ready to go home?
That's a good question.
Kind of with what you're saying.
Yeah. So the question you just asked was the one in the chat. How would you assist families with that? Kind of goes along what I was just talking about, but talking with the parents about allowing their child to explore, quote unquote. I mean, like there are certain things that it's just like, I don't know if I want you to explore that, like if they're too young to drink alcohol or do drugs or that kind of thing, like not like experimenting in college. It's more just like exploring who they are, like being curious about who they are instead of feeling fear, because their parents tell them that they should be a certain way. And then when they're not that way, they're afraid of themselves because they're different and they're afraid of that difference. So helping the parents understand that it's just like, not only can you help your child feel good about themselves, but you can participate in it. Like ask them questions, get to know them. Like don't ask the questions in a way of like listening to respond, where it's like what they say, you're just like combating it and having a debate basically on whether or not they actually feel this way. Like kind of help them dive into it a little bit, and maybe that answer will come out eventually, of like that, because I believe that like the answer is inside the child and like how they feel. And maybe they were at school and they feel like they should be attracted to the same sex, but they're not really, or like maybe they are attracted to the same sex, but they feel like they're not supposed to be. Whatever it may be, they feel like they're different and they feel like that's bad. So maybe helping the parents understand that it's just like your child is different than you guys are. That's good. Like, why do you want kids that are exactly the same as you? Like, that's not entirely possible. Like, they're going to be different. They're going to have different beliefs. Like, yes, some beliefs may be the same, but for the most part, I believe that their beliefs are going to be different, and have little pieces of things learned from their parents. Oh, we have 5 minutes left. Oh my gosh, I've been talking for so long. All right, we'll go through the rest of this pretty quickly then. So the threat to the image. So the main threat to false identities is the truth. If we go, well, let me see. Yeah, so clients get defensive towards others when those other people point out things that are in the who we are category. So for example, let's say somebody like tried to make an insult to somebody and they're just like, you're a purple dragon, like tried to use that as an insult, and you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the stupidest thing you could say. Like, obviously I'm not a purple dragon. You wouldn't get offended by that. But if somebody said you talk too much, then all of a sudden, like in the who we are section is someone who talks too much. And so we put up that wall and try to be who we wish we were, which was someone who didn't talk so much. And so then they kind of pull back and don't talk as much as they used to, because it was pointed out to them that that was a flaw by somebody else. They don't want people to see themselves for who they really are because they don't like themselves as they really are. They were taught by whoever it is, parents, friends, siblings, things like that, that certain parts of themselves like aren't good. And so they try and hide that. And that's in the who we are portion instead of the who we wish we were. Who we wish we were doesn't have that. They're not that kind of thing. They like themselves for like who they are, but it's really who they wish they were. Those with anxiety and depression seek to control the future to maintain the image. Maintaining the image, like if something is out of their control in the future, it might trigger who they are, those things inside of them, that perceived darkness that they don't want to look at, that they don't love. There's pieces inside of them that they have been taught to not love about themselves. So they're trying to control the future because if something happens that kind of breaks the who we wish we were thing a little bit and causes them to feel emotions that they don't want to feel, like they don't want that because they want to keep up that false image. So letting go of the identity, this is really hard for people to do. It's basically why they come to therapy. But when a client attaches an I to their story, they have created an identity. So it's not the like, I'm trying to figure out an example, but with the, I guess with the talking too much thing, when it's like, I talk too much, like they create that story, or I am depressed. That's a good one. I'm depressed. I am anxious. I am, instead of like, I'm a person who's struggling with depression. I'm a person who is struggling with anxiety. Like that's very different. So even if the identity is toxic, they have trouble letting go because their ego is fighting to keep that identity alive, because the ego believes that if that identity dies, then they die, because they attached an I to the story. And now it feels like it's part of you. So like letting go of that identity and doing something different, that is a threat, not only to the image, but to the ego. And it's hard to do that. When somebody says I'm an alcoholic or whatever it may be, it's just like, no, you're a human who's struggling with being addicted to alcohol or like craving it or whatever it is. They are not the symptom. They experience symptoms, but they are not that. They're not their diagnosis. They're a person who is struggling with that diagnosis. But when a client lets go of the false identity, two things happen. One, they let go of the control that others have over them. So with my client, as we work together and he lets go of those false identities, he's letting go of the control that his mom still has over him, even though he's not living with her, right? Even though they're not around each other all that much, like he's letting go of that control, and he's taking hold of the control that he's been longing for, the responsibility, like taking responsibility for his own beliefs and like learning that and kind of just going through the work in order to figure that out. He's taking control of his life and the way he feels. Lastly, real quick, we'll just talk about the not knowing approach. It's basically just, it requires that our understanding, explanations, and interpretations in therapy are not limited by prior experiences or theoretically formed truths and knowledge. So meaning that like you're not going into the session with a preconceived notion. You're not using like, oh, anxiety is like this, so obviously my client's like this. You're not using any of that. Instead, you're just sitting and you're listening to understand. You're going in not knowing what the patient's going to say. So like I said, to not know is not to have an unfounded or inexperienced judgment. Like we're all experienced. It doesn't mean that we're doing things wrong, but rather it refers more widely to the presumed meaning that the therapist brings to the clinical interview. So not going in with oh, I read this in their chart, or I read this in their paperwork that they filled out, so obviously they're struggling with this. Like you don't really know that. So like kind of leaving all that at the door and going in with a not knowing approach and just letting the client inform you. I'm gonna go through this. I really like that. This is a blurb from the client is the expert in not knowing approach. And it basically just says that when you go to read something, if you're reading an article, you're going in trying to learn something new. And that doesn't mean you're letting go of all these things that you already learned, but instead you're opening yourself up to learn something that you probably didn't know before, whether it's in the news or whatever it is. Like it's different, and you're allowing yourself to learn that even and keep what you knew at the same time, right? So just ultimately, it's just, as it says, patience is virtue. Just be patient with your client. Like they know themselves, they know how they feel. And it's basically our job to help them understand that they can open up, they can give themselves permission to feel those things as they work with us in order to learn more about who they are rather than who they wish they were. But that is it. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to email Michael and he can send them to me and I can send things and he'll send this out to you guys. But I really appreciate you letting me do this. I actually really enjoyed it. I didn't think I was going to be able to talk for 45 minutes, but it went really well. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm just kind of, there's what I'm looking for. Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up or anything here. You can. I'm hoping right now you're seeing my screen. So what I'll do is I'll send you out an evaluation form in it actually maybe tomorrow morning, just because the hospital's got some firewalls and they won't let me get into the form. I need to fix it or get it done. So I'll send it out in the morning. If you will just put this code in, fill it out and get it submitted, then give me 2 or 3 days after that, and I will get the certificates to you. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of us and touch base with us. We do know there's a lot of issues, a lot of concerns out there. We've got a lot of programs that we're trying to do in the communities to help. And we're going to talk about 1 or 2 of those in 2 weeks. And so we hope you can join us again then. And thanks again. Have a great day. Oh, are they? Oh, wait a second. I can't do that. Share screen. There's the code again for those that were asking. My chat box disappeared, so yeah.
Yeah, you go down at the bottom.
Well, it disappeared, the whole box. So that's why. I'm not sure who's over at Forte Strong. I'll email you the evaluation form, and there's just a spot that asks for that code, and it'll be right there. So I hope that answers that question. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? Let me just take a second here. Oh, did I hit the wrong? I may have hit the wrong. Yeah, I may have hit. Yeah.